Welcome to Breakaway Sales with Mike Carrison, where you will learn the secrets and strategies, actions and tactics of the best salespeople in the world to get the career you want and the life you deserve.
Hey folks, Mike Carrison, Breakaway Sales, and I am back again for another podcast this morning. Last time we were talking about the objections that occur in a sales call and how we can be very intimidated by them, and at times creates a lot of tension in the sales process. I don't mind objections. In fact, I don't hear the word no, I hear the word not yet, which simply means that they're not fully present. They can't fully embrace what it is that I'm trying to express. So if you go back to the structured sales cycle, you always want to have a strong opening. You want to make an impact. You want to ask world-class questions, which is going to help you establish trust in that relationship. You got to be prepared in advance to make a good presentation or demonstration or proposal presentation, whatever it might be. And then finally, as you come through the closing cycle, to take them where you want to go, which means you know in advance of the call what you're trying to close for, you're likely to stumble upon objections. And again, I don't want you to hear no, I want you to hear not yet. And last time we talked about the four main obstacles that prevent a sale. One is no trust, meaning I don't know the industry, I don't know your products and services, how they apply, the customer's confused, you don't ask the right questions, penetrating questions that demonstrate your knowledge and your expertise. All that is flabby and kind of falls apart. That's going to create an environment of no trust. They don't trust you, they're not going to buy. Simple as that. The second one was no need, if you remember. They trust you, they see you're a professional, but they just really don't have a need right now. And sometimes that's true. But you either have to create a need or you have to actually find a need. And that's done through world-class questions that you actually listen to the answers for. If there's a need, but the presentation you just made doesn't hit the mark, then you're going to run into a no help situation. I trust you, I'm motivated to do something, but I don't see how your solution is going to help me. So no help. And the fourth one, of course, is no hurry, which drives us all nuts because the call's going well, the process is going well, you look like you're going to get the deal. You think you've handled most of, if not all of the objections. You're in alignment with the customer. The rapport is solid. The empathy is solid. Everything's going in the right direction. And all of a sudden, boom, everything stops and they're no longer talking to you. They're not returning your phone calls, they're not returning your emails, and it goes into a black hole. No hurry. We talked about that as well. And there's only one anecdote to that one, and that is pick up the phone, confront it head on. You've earned the right to do that, and just find out, because there's always something that's behind that. It's a very unusual departure from their normal behaviors in a no hurry situation. So those are the big four: no trust, no need, no help, and no hurry. So let's take that to a more practical, real-life situation. I'll give you an example. I'm going to go back to my software days. This was back in the mid to late 90s. My company was selling a product which is a complex end-to-end ERP solution for the manufacturing industry. Basically, a piece of software like SAP or Oracle that runs the entire operation. Most of this was in mid-sized, smaller manufacturing companies, maybe around $100 to $200 million in sales. We were pretty good at it, and I had a sales force of about 16 guys and gals and a bunch of pre-sales people that did our demonstrations, and we had technicians and trainers and all of that stuff, all the IT consultancy that would support that. So we had a pretty good, solid operation in those days, probably somewhere around 150 people in the company at the time. Now, we would work very hard with these particular prospects because they were going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 for software, and in some cases $1 million for services. So these are $1.5 million, sometimes as high as $2 million projects. You're not going to do that in a 3-call close. That's very high and wide selling. You got to talk to the CEO, the entire management team. Then you got to get to the folks that are in the operations side doing running the business every day. And it's a series of discovery, it's a series of demonstrations, presentations, and overcoming all kinds of different objections along the way to get that process turned on. So it might take, over the series of 6 months, it might take 20 sales calls, critical sales calls, in order to get that kind of a deal done. So when I say that you have to open a certain way in order to close for something specific, that's exactly what had to happen in order to advance the sales process. So if you're starting a new relationship with somebody that's in the accounts payable or purchasing team and you've not met them before, then you've got to make an impact there. You've got to ask the right questions. You have to, so the whole cycle, right, comes back into play every single step of the way. That's why the structured sales cycle is so important. It's something you need to master. But once we got to, in one client in particular, once we got to the end of the sales process, we thought we had won the deal. We had worked 6 months. We thought we had covered everything, that we had surfaced all the potential objections. And sometimes it's best to surface the objection as opposed to wait for it to show up. In other words, if there's something out there, I want to be like a bird dog. I want to flush those babies out and I want to address it head on and get past it, as opposed to thinking I'm winning when I'm really losing. I'm lying to myself and I put another 3 months of effort into it and I didn't win. Why would you bother to do that? So in objection handling, you want to address it head on as soon as you possibly can and try to flush those things out. So one of the ways I do that is with something I call the Ben Duffy method, where I'll literally say to the prospect, you know, if I were you making this decision, here are the things that I'd be concerned about. This is the stuff that would be weighing heavily on my heart in terms of making a $1 million investment for my company. And I would literally list all the things that they should be worried about, in which case it invokes a discussion, allows me to handle things up front, and I actually take the lead on handling the objection as opposed to having it hit me in the back of the head and catch me by surprise. I hope that makes sense. But back to my story, there was a company that was here in Minneapolis that we were doing really well with. And we were up against another company called J.D. Edwards, which at the time was selling mid-sized ERP solutions as well. We respected them. They were good. So we always had to fight pretty hard in order to beat them, to win. So it was the end of the sales process. All the votes were in. They had met with their management team. They discussed our proposal and J.D. Edwards' proposal. We were brought in, and it made me a little nervous, but we got the call, said, come on in, we want to talk to you. Well, that's usually good news, but we got a few problems to work out, or it's bad news, we went the other way. And I just had this sick feeling in my stomach that we blew it somewhere. And I wanted to live in reality. So we went to the customer, and sure enough, we were sitting in front of them in what we thought was going to be the final meeting, or at least the meeting where there would be agreement, which would lead to final contracts. They looked us right in the eye and said, we love you guys. We love your product. We think that you meet all of our criteria. There's just so many things about your product. And of course, while they're saying this, my stomach's starting to sour because I know it's coming. But I'll never forget it. Dan, who was their chief operating officer, said, Mike, here's why we decided to go with J.D. Edwards. And of course, there was the thud. We decided to go with them because their order processing system, which is very front end to all these other applications, fit our situation best. And we're more of a job shop rather than a repetitive manufacturer. So theirs was more versatile for kitting and for specialized orders and for engineering diagrams and converting those orders into manufacturing orders. The whole process just seems much more streamlined and simple for us. Well, we could have started backpedaling and defending, but I thought, that's not the right thing to do. So here's how you handle that. I first said, look, I recognize that we have a difference here. Where you are at in terms of the order processing and where we are at are two different things. I see that, I recognize it, I respect it. So that's the first thing I do, is just acknowledge them. So that's really, and that leads to the second part, and that is ask some questions. And the questions are bumper type questions, like, tell me more. Can you be more specific? I know you've done your homework, but the more I understand this, the better. We've both invested a lot of time in this. I want you to make an informed, right decision, but just tell me more. So now I got them to re-engage and talked about what it was about our system versus their system. So I could listen, which is the third thing you do, listen to understand. So rather than listening to formulate your arguments and your defenses, which don't win any deals, I was listening to truly understand empathetically with what was on their mind. Now, once I heard that, then I could repeat back what it is that I heard. And if you can explain someone's point of view back to them better than they can do it, now they really trust you. In fact, they're connected and they feel respected, which is going to calm things down as opposed to a fight, which is going to rile things up. When you rile things up in the deal, you're out. They can't wait to get you out the door. So I now engage them into a discussion about this. I listened to understand, and I responded back. I said, so let me see if I got this. You believe JD Edwards is better for you, not so much because all of the applications are better, but one application specifically on the front end is better. And the 3 or 4 reasons for that are 1, 2, 3. I won't go into the detail. And they responded with, that's exactly it. You've got it. You totally understand it. I said, okay. So let me ask you this question then. If that issue regarding the kitting and the order processing and the engineering drawings and being able to give you more versatility on the front end with order processing, if that problem could go away, how would you then feel about the decision? I wanted to make sure everything was on the table. And he responded, Dan said, well, like I said, we were happy with all of it. We just didn't know how to get over this. I said, okay, so shame on us. So then I take responsibility. Shame on us for not being closer to that. And if we do work together, we got to make sure that everything that we work on is very close, very tight, very integrated. So I was building rapport, building trust. So I said, you probably don't realize this, Dan, but we have come across this issue before. And quite frankly, we've come across this issue before with other JD Edwards accounts. And here's how we solved it. Can I help? Can I share that with you and just give you another point of view before you make your final decision? Well, yeah, absolutely. We've come this far, Mike. I'm happy to hear what you have to say. Well, then I went into an explanation about 2 different approaches for solving it. And I said, first of all, any approach that JD Edwards takes or that we take, none of it is going to be a perfect fit. Software never is a perfect fit, but it can be modified and adjusted without necessarily destroying the rest of the system's integrity. Well, the fact that I admitted that none of it's a perfect fit and never will be, that also made him more comfortable because I was being honest with him. So I then offered the 2 different ways to solve the problem. But I said, you know what, let's do this. Let's do this. Before I present these 2 alternatives for solving the problem, I'd like to have 48 hours to pull my team together to make sure we totally understand it. And I'd like to have access to Bill and Mary, because Bill and Mary are experts in this on your team. And I promise you that I'll either come back to you in 2 days and say, you know what, I don't think it's a fit. I think it'll be too hard of a stretch and it'll probably cost too much and it'll be too complex. Or I'm going to come back and say, I've got this and I've nailed it. And if I can truly nail it, and with the rest of the system being perfect for you, or at least in pretty good shape for you, would that not be a good approach before you make your final decision? He said, you got the 48 hours. I don't want to spend $1.5 million and be wrong. So I said, thank you very much. I said, so let me just wrap up. So this is how I pull it back together. Let me just wrap it up. When we started this call, it was your opinion that JD Edwards had won, and that was the direction you were going to go, because while the rest of it wasn't perfect, the order processing seemed much more important to you and a very, very good fit from your point of view. So far, so good? Okay. But that said, you were also very excited about our business and what could have been a good business relationship, and you thought our software was a good fit in any other way. So far, so good there. Yes. Okay. And then finally, the two approaches that I just discussed with you, we don't have a lot of detail around that yet, but we will get there. And I need 2 days to do that. And if I come back to you and solve this, is it reasonable to assume that we could go forward? And that was a close, pretty soft close. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't go waste my time for 2 days only to come back and have them say, no, you're still out. I said, I need to understand this because we are going to work our tails off to produce two meaningful solutions for you and then make one recommendation. But I want you to see what both look like. And if that's acceptable, then maybe at that point in time, you'd be in a position to change your mind and go with our company. And he said, Mike, that seems very fair. You've earned the right. And that's the other thing. When you've worked hard and you've done the right things and you've been empathetic and you've been sensitive and you've been honest and you haven't been pushy and salesy and argumentative, when you're just plain rational there, empathetically trying to solve a problem, invested with the client, then what are they going to do? Turn their back on you? They'd be crazy to do that. Besides, I knew that J.D. Edwards had a bunch of holes in their order processing system, and I knew how they sold, and I knew how to overcome that, but I wasn't going to argue about it in this call. My objective was to overcome it with 2 days of grace period, an opportunity to clean my act up and come back and make a strong, compelling argument in defense of our offering, and also to give them the benefit of all of the things that we brought to the table, which they truly appreciated, which would have been a win-win. So it's not about tips and techniques. Here's my favorite one. Well, other people have felt that way before, and I certainly understand how you feel. And however, when they evaluated it more closely, they found that blah, blah, blah. I mean, who comes up with this crap? So that's not selling. That's junk. That's tips. That's techniques. That's inauthentic behavior. Nobody's going to buy that. If you want to win, you got to know your product. You got to know your service. You got to know your competition. You got to know the industry that you're selling to. You have to have a good anticipation of the objections that are going to come from different people. The CEO versus the CFO versus the CIO versus the COO versus the VP of sales versus the director of operations versus the vice president of manufacturing are all going to have different things on their minds about what they want. And so you're not going to have one objection. You're going to have objections from all of them. So you see how important that back wheel knowledge that I talked about earlier, the power wheel that allows you to go where you want to go, that's the back wheel. You've got to know your products and your services. And if you don't, it's Endsville. But if you do, and you've taken the time to study it, talk to your boss, talk to your customers, talk to the best salespeople in your office, find out more. Go to the trade shows, understand the articles that they're writing about this stuff, digest it, become an expert. And when you are, that's powerful stuff. So I encourage you to take that on. So it's the mere force of your knowledge with some empathy and some poise that allows you to overcome objections. Don't be afraid of them. They're not saying no. They're saying not yet. And believe me, this stuff works. Now, have I lost deals? You bet. And when I go back and critique it, it's not so much that I lost as I made a mistake. I made a mistake. And sales reps, we can't make many, okay? We're not perfect, and I don't expect that. But you can't make too many dumb mistakes, okay? And that's where mental toughness comes into play. So again, every call counts. How am I going to open? How do I make an impact? What am I going to present? What objections am I likely to get? And am I ready to handle it? Before we walked into that example of that call, we knew what to do. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today and visit breakawaysalespro.com for much more on how you can get the career and life you want with breakaway sales skills.